After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, and bishop b5 check, we're playing the Moscow. We're going to go through knight to d7 in this video, and as we know, we play d4 now. In this video, we're going to go through what happens when the opponent doesn't take the pawn in d4. But rather play something else. We're going to go through a6 now, or knight f6, normal development. Okay, so a6 attacking the bishop, we take the knight. And after the bishop takes back, we take the pawn in c5. So that's what you're going to do. Pawn takes back, knight to c3. We now have an idea of playing a knight to e5 and d5. These two squares are now very good for our knights. So, knight f6, bishop to f4. And e5 belongs to white, d5 belongs to white, unless you think black can play e6. But before we go through that, let's go through b5 now. The idea of attacking the knight so that the knight can take the pawn in e4 and misplacing this knight. Here we don't care and we just play knight e5. We've got loads of attack now, and what's black going to do? So if black does play b4, knight to d5. And this is now getting really scary. Our opponent here has a choice, either taking a knight or taking the pawn, for instance. White is already winning here. Black can't just go on with development, let's say e6, attacking the knight. I mean, it can, but then you just swap everything. Knight takes, queen cannot take because then you got queen d7, ending the game. So pawn takes back, knight takes bishop, queen takes, queen to f3. Idea of castling and then playing rook d1. What we have achieved basically is that the black player doesn't have anywhere safe to castle and never will. Okay, let's try maybe bishop g7, queen to g3. It just stops our opponent from castling, because if black were to castle now, obviously here, then bishop h6 will finish the game. Whereas if black castles this side, then you still got an attack on the bishop. So even if rook goes to g8 now, rook to d1. Okay, so queen a4, getting active, attacking this pawn. This one too. White ignores that and castles. Position evaluated +3 as if white was up a piece. The thing is that the black king is in huge trouble. As you can tell, there's too many moves that can happen now, so you're going to have to take it from here. But in this position, you have fun. All you need to do is just bring the rook slowly but steady to the 7th rank. So in this position, what if our opponent doesn't play, let's say, e6, but rather takes the pawn? Let's start with this. Takes the pawn. Here you take the bishop. Queen takes back, and now knight to c7 check. The knight is defended by the pawn. The king is forced to move, unless black wants to give us the queen. But let's say king moves, but after the swap you're winning the rook. And here, what if instead of knight takes here, or pawn to e6, what if black just takes our knight and reduces the initiative? Okay, well, take back. This is just too strong now. What is left to do for black? Development, maybe okay, e6, queen to f3. And you know what the idea is? Knight f7 check, king takes, and then it's discover check when you move the bishop. So you could play bishop to g5. Actually, is the best move. Should win a lot of material. What happens after the bishop to d6? Well, here the best move is the taking e6. And obviously, bishop can't just take our knight, because we can take this bishop with check. So that's Zwischenzug. So after bishop takes back, defending the square f7 further. Too late. Queen to c6 check. And now blocking doesn't work, because simply you're going to attack on this bishop, but the most evil move is this one, knight to d7. The bishop can't just take our bishop, because then you've got a discover check that wins the rook. So knight b6 check. When the king moves, you just go here to a8, stopping any attack of the queen here in d2, because you're pinning it, so you're simplifying. And in this position after the check, what if the king just moves immediately? This doesn't help, because you castle. Position evaluated +4 of +5 as far as I remember. The bishop is now pinned. And you've got double attack on it, so there's nothing to do for black. So let's take it from the start to make a recap, and it always helps. to understand this better. So knight to d7, d4. We're looking at the variation where they don't take in d4. Okay, a6 immediately, you take. Bishop takes, take, knight c3. Knight f6, bishop f4. Now here we're still looking at, we're going to look at e6, but now we're still looking at b5. We mentioned we play knight to e4, knight to e5. And after b4 attacking the knight, we remove the knight. And we don't worry about this pawn. We mentioned why. So let's still look at this line. Knight takes in d5. Okay, take back. And now we mentioned e6. Doesn't work. What happens after? g6. Okay, same thing. Queen f3. You're making that threat. Bishop g7 cannot happen because knight f7. And you're winning a lot of material. King takes. Let's back to bishop c7, winning the queen. So in this position, what if f6? Okay, well, queen h5 check. Only way to block would be g6, and now knight to g6. And now black has to play this move in order to survive. You take the bishop, but you're still in a winning position. You're going to win the pawn in g6 as well when it's done recapturing your knight. The king will be misplaced, you can castle long and swap the central pawn, so you are winning. So in this position, earlier we went through, just a couple of moves ago, b4, and then we moved the knight to d5, which is really good for white. What if black doesn't do that, but rather just speeds up with development, because obviously you see what happens when you don't develop. Okay, knight g6, for example, to put the bishop in fianchetto. Knight to d5 comes anyway. And now obviously e6 cannot happen, because knight takes f6 check, and then you're going to take here in d7, it's game over. Knight taking the knight also doesn't work because queen takes back. So in this position, you may argue, okay, what if e6 attacking the queen? Okay, queen to b7, and we're still attacking d7 square whilst keeping an eye on the rook. We want to take that rook. Nothing saves black. Let's say queen to c8, trying to swap everything, queen to b6. Rook to b8 attacking the queen, queen to a5. Rook to b7 now, giving more support over the bishop. Castle, because we're going to castle anyway. Bishop d7 developing. Looks like this is going to be a normal game. Rook to d6. Castle, and now the other rook is coming. A lot of attack. You've got 3 attackers over d7. The bishop can't really move anywhere that makes sense. Rook to d8 to defend that further. Okay, queen to d2. Now there's just too much attack. The only thing left to do will be to remove a defender, which is bishop takes the knight, bishop takes back. And now we're equal, but we're threatening so much stuff. So position just fell apart for the black player. And here, just a couple of moves ago, what if instead of rook d8, black plays bishop to e8 to save the bishop from the massive pressure we were applying upon it? Well, okay, rook to d8, attacking the queen. Only move is queen to c7. Desperately looking for a swap, and we are going to do that because queen takes, rook takes, and now knight takes in g6 comes with an attack on this rook and an attack on this rook by both minor pieces. So let's do this from the start and see something different. d6, bishop e5 check, knight d7, a6. Okay, take, knight c3. Knight f6, bishop f4. And now let's look at e6. Right, it looks like it stops our plan of playing the strong knight to d5 move, but we just play knight d5 anyway. Bishop e7 developing, g4. This is the move. And after g5, the knight will be misplaced. And obviously castle will run into the storm of pawns that has already been initiated, and after long castle, it's just a very much better position for white. The best thing to do for black will be to trade pieces here. Bishop c6, we take it. And queen takes will be favorable for us, because then we can take back the rook and develop. Pawn takes back is going to happen anyway, so we have damaged the pawn structure. Queen to e2 now, since our opponent doesn't want to swap queens, then at this point we could just win the tempo. We did give black the opportunity to trade queen first, but either way we're going to a better endgame. Here, we don't need to give the open file to the opponent. So queen e2, queen to b6, applying pressure on b2. Okay, long castle. Now rook to b8 to put more pressure over this square and create threats. It's not possible because of the bishop. And we're always going to control that. You can't push e5, you can't play bishop d6, you can't do anything about it. What if knight to d7 with the idea of pushing e5, and that's gonna be a bit more problematic. King to b1, well, we don't care, because after e5, rook takes d7. Boom. And now if pawn takes, then we're just gonna double up the rooks. It's a fantastic position to play. There's absolutely no threat going on. If rook goes to b8, threatening this is not like an unstoppable threat or something. You can literally play anything you want. Like knight a4 or b3, they all do. So if king takes the rook, bishop e5, keeps controlling b8, doesn't make it happen. Position evaluated +2, even though this was black playing only top engine moves to resist in a faulty variation. Bishop d6, obviously, to trade with this unbelievable bishop cannot be played because rook d1 will end the game. So one more thing we need to look at, and then we close this video, is after bishop e5 check, knight d7, okay, d4, they don't take the pawn, but instead of a6, let's look at the immediate development of the knight, which comes with an attack on our pawn. Okay, knight c3, defending it. And now, if black takes this pawn, it's going to be a transposition from one of the previous games. So make sure you check out all the previous games of this saga before you watch this video, or when you're done with this video, make sure you understand how to play the Moscow as good as you can. In this video, we're focusing on when black doesn't take this pawn. Okay, e6, normal move. We take this pawn. Pawn takes back, and now e5. The knight has to move. In knight to d5, there's two attackers there. Knight to g4, it puts double attack on this pawn, but this knight in d7 is pinned, so you can just kick the knight away. You just play h3, the knight will have to go to h6, so that doesn't make sense. So after, let's say a6, counter-attacking, here you play bishop to f1, it's the best move. And now the knight can go to g4, and it looks like there's enough attack over that pawn, but now queen to e2, defending it further. Bishop to e7, developing, h3. The knight is forced to go to h6. Takes. And now queen to e3, attacking this pawn in h6. And we are infiltrating, and black has got nowhere to castle. What if bishop to g5? Knight takes. And after pawn takes, the black player fixed the pawn structure, but we're going to castle long. And here's the very serious problem that our opponent has. It's these two dark squares and the fact that we can just jump to e4 with the knight. This is going to be game over very soon. Okay, then you can argue, what if our opponent... Okay, then you can argue, what if our opponent takes back with the queen and at least develops and at least gets out of some trouble? Okay, f4. The queen will have to move again, and our threat of castling and playing knight in e4, ruling the board, remains. So in this position, we're just going to make a quick mention. We saw before what happened after a6 and after knight g4. What happens if knight to g8? Now this is not worth seeing, because obviously this crucial win of tempos just gave us a better position. The ideas here will be simple. Castle, and after a6 attacking the bishop, you retreat the bishop to d3, and our opponent has lost control over these two dark squares forever. If g6, for instance, to develop, rook to e1, bishop g7, knight to e4. It's just too late for black to castle. Black can't castle anymore without giving us the possibility to play knight d6 check, knight g5, everyone attacking f7. The queen can go to f3. There are too many threats. And in this position, instead of g6, what if black challenges the presence of this very strong e5 pawn with f6? This is an immediate win for white, because you take, knight takes back, it looks like black is developing, but you are actually improving the position of your pieces. Rook to e1 is very uncomfortable to me, because now our opponent will have to move the knight. Okay, knight b6, so that the bishop defends this pawn. Too late, because knight g5 just does the job.